Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Omar and I decided that we won't take too much of your time. It's been a day of rich insights and discussions. Tough to summarize such a wealth of knowledge in a few minutes, but we ought to do our job. I will just try and highlight 5 standout ideas from the session just gone by, and thereafter maybe give you 5 takeaways from the discussions that I came up with myself. So, first, the 5 takeaways. 1, the importance of think tanks focusing on non-traditional security was reiterated time and again. Human security, poverty, disease, health, immigration, natural disasters, fake news, etc. Are just as important as traditional security issues that we discuss most often in terms of the economic, the political, and the security dynamics. Yuval Harari, the famous Israeli author, once said that sugar powder is now more dangerous than gunpowder. Obesity kills more than terrorists do. 2, equally, traditional security issues were also highlighted. Nationalism, authoritarianism, which pits think tanks against governments, maintaining international stability, combating human rights abuses, friction between superpowers, other geostrategic tensions, etc., were also mentioned. These are, of course, keeping think tanks busy. These and other contests were creatively grouped under 5 T's: trade, technology, territory, terror, and tenets, basically implying ideological principles, value-based governance, etc., which also explains the increasing connect and disconnect between non-traditional security issues and traditional security issues, especially vaccination being seen as a tool of politics, both domestically and internationally. 3, there was a call for think tanks working towards extending policy advice to shaping public opinion, especially regarding the importance of everyone getting vaccinated. It was also stressed that think tanks have a political role beyond research pursuits. Some recommended global solidarity and consensus instead of perpetrating the politics of the pandemic. 4, COVID-19 and the communication revolution therefrom have been a wake-up call for physical think tanks. We coped with the crisis all right, but physical think tanks are monsters, really, in terms of being resource incentive. Governments and private companies are also facing budgetary cuts now, so startup think tanks may mushroom, and like it or not, they're likely to be digital. The experience during COVID has proved that indeed a hybrid model is viable, and it's not an ideal substitute, but it is not totally ineffective either. So be on your toes, innovate, or perish is the inference. And finally, how can we become more relevant? By becoming more trustworthy was a call, more transparent, more durable partnership and collaboration. I think the last session highlighted a few of these things. Collaboration between and among individuals and institutions too. Many experts suggested this morning and this afternoon that partnerships and collaborations should be by design, innovation and business being the end results of such meaningful tie-ups. Forward-looking track 2 and track 1.5 diplomacy involving think tanks are capable of shaping change, and we've seen a number of examples being cited about how they helped bring nations closer. Shared simulations and scenario building approaches was one other thing mentioned. Honeybees style, they said. Jim McGann style, they said, but with a measured code of conduct. Just a tad different from famous Hollywood film, but combining the good, bad, and the dangerous of all the morning sessions. Here are my 5 own takeaways. 1, think tanks are important, useful, relevant, in trouble, but still in business. But it is equally important to wonder where we were as think tanks, as thinkocracy, during Brexit or before Brexit, or in forecasting Brexit and forecasting COVID, or a Trump victory in US elections, or a swift Taliban return in Afghanistan. I guess we were all busy analyzing events gone by rather than look forward and help prepare for it. Are think tanks more reactive than proactive? Two, this has meant that while public support for think tanks in surveys was reportedly about 50% only in 1970s, declined to about 20% a few years ago. And imagine, World Bank reports that more than 30% of its reports were not even downloaded, let alone read. So what about reports by think tanks like ours? So we need to innovate. Three, I wanted to highlight a threat from our own breed. Many think tankers are becoming consultants. I'm sure some of us, or most of us here, know one other friend or colleague or former colleague who's launched a consultancy or is working for a consultancy now, or a PR firm doing the same kind of job, but maybe earning much more. No love lost, but how do we cope with this competition from within the family? Four, most people here suggested forecasting for the future. How do we change? Given the new trend in other sectors, I pulled out a few, looking up internet, lest I be accused of plagiarism, especially in the food and beverage industry. Can we design a cloud kitchen, like set up for think tanks, something called a policy kitchen? Can we think of temporary think tanks with different approaches, much like music bands? They come together, work together on an album, on a project, move away, form another band. Can we do that? Imagine even AI-driven think tank, like Steven Spielberg would envisage. Whatever it is, don't rule them out. Make collaboration more purposeful. Finally, tying up all these, the diversity of think tanks and experts here indicates that the world is much more of a multiplex. It's a word combining both multiple powers, but also a complex scenario. So multiplex, it is more than multipolar, it is more than multi-aligned than it's made out to be. And the world was already becoming flatter at the turn of the century, but I think COVID has made it even more flatter. And taking a cue from this, it is possible that more non-Western think tanks could become robust and effective moving forward and contribute to promoting new ideas, thus becoming more providers rather than just recipients of innovative ideas. And hopefully all this collective effort will, as one said, make the winter of despair change into a spring of hope. In closing, let me be the devil's advocate. Think tanks were supposed to be thinking in a think tank atmosphere, right? In a tank-like atmosphere, sorry. But I fear we may actually get tanked in future if we are not flexible and don't adapt to the new disruptions. So remember one thing, think tanks could mutate to become think and do tanks in the future, and the future is faster than you think. Thank you.
I only have one page, so don't worry. I'd like to express my condolences to Jim McGann's family and loved ones and colleagues, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm going to focus on one takeaway from today to complement everything that was just said, which is on the role of independence. One of the models we study in economics is what's called the principal agent model, principal AL, not principal LE, which is about how a manager, which is the principal, structures an employee's contract, that's the agent, to ensure that the employee serves the interests of the manager. This model has wide applications, from shareholders and chief executives to soccer coaches and their players, or to prime ministers and cabinets and so on and so forth. Now, in 1831, Lord Wellington in Britain, fresh from his first term as the Prime Minister of Britain, and following his first-hand experience in the bitter and complex Napoleonic Wars, established what was to become the first think tank, which is the Royal United Service Institute, RUSI. And in so doing, he demonstrated a unique application of the principal agent problem, which is senior military commanders seeking advice from experts. Now, one of the most important elements of Wellington's action was his decision to make RUSI independent, rather than absorbing RUSI into the formal structure of government, like one of the in-house research departments that you find in any ministry. In this regard, he displayed the same visionary powers that helped him secure victory at Waterloo, because Wellington noticed something that all of his contemporaries failed to see, i.e. the benefits of having an independent think tank. Today, this global summit is a demonstration of how independence advances human knowledge. We're all able to speak freely without worrying that our words will be taken to represent a formal diplomatic position because we are independent. We're able to exchange ideas and to learn from one another at breakneck speed because we're independent. We're able to subject our proposals to peer review, be it in written or oral form, because we are independent. Thus, Wellington showed us why the principal sometimes wants to voluntarily cede control of voluntarily concede control of the agent, especially in the realm of human knowledge. It's no accident that Wellington arrived at this conclusion at the beginning of the 19th century after the Enlightenment, which was all about knowledge exchange and the benefits of openness. Nothing stifles the production of novel ideas more than cooping researchers up in an office where they can only talk with one another. Whether it is universities, think tanks, research centers, or consultancies, for scholars to advance human knowledge and for them to provide sage advice, they need to be able to explore their intellectual environment without restraint, and independence is one of the best ways of affording scholars the requisite freedom. Thank you for coming to Bahrain in person or virtually, and thank you for allowing my colleagues and me to listen to your ideas and for listening to ours. Thank you.